Hey, folks.
Hey.
Hello, hello.
Thank you.
Oh, it's cozy now at the table. That's nice. Folks, we wanted to talk about the foundation and some of the things you've been doing. It's been like amazing to see, at least from my point of view. Like the foundation was created a couple of years ago, and it's clear that the goals that it was like set out at its start are really like being achieved now, and that is something to celebrate. I think PHP is in a very good place, and I think the foundation has a very big impact on all of that. So I wanted to quickly introduce you, and then I'm just gonna give the stage to you, unless you still had something on your mind.
No,
Nels.
I'm just looking forward to hearing and seeing all of that.
I mean, you're part of the foundation as well, right?
Sure, but we're going to skip over that today.
Okay.
I'm going to leave this to Roman and to Gina.
So skipping over that, Niels, by the way?
Gina,
They've got the slides.
you're a core developer at the foundation. You need to be a bit closer to the microphone.
Oh, okay.
That's
I'll be a bit closer to the microphone.
Okay. And well, I asked before PHPverse started, but you have like around 30 RFCs.
Too many to count. I don't remember. I mean, do you count every single item on like the mass deprecation list as a single IFC or not? Because then
That's a good point.
then we're tallying up quite a few.
Yeah.
But, no, I've done quite a bit of work on PHP in the last 5-ish years. So.
That's nice. And then there's Roman, who's what's the title, Roman? Executive Director? Is that?
Yes.
Yes, the
Correct.
Executive Director. I don't know what that means, but Roman is like helping out with a lot of stuff. And kind of nice news as well that I feel proud to share is that Roman is also, of course, has been my colleague for a couple of years now at the PHP Storm team, but you're now becoming the PHP Storm team lead. No, that's not the right word. I should say something different.
Product lead.
Product lead. So you're essentially going to steer the direction of PHP Storm as well in the coming future.
Yes, and I'm happy to be focused on PHP full time now.
Right, yeah. That's awesome. So, folks, there are already some questions, I think, coming in here, but I'm going to give you some time to talk whatever you wanted to talk about, and then we'll go back to the Q&A. So the stage is yours.
Thank you. We're gonna share some things about the PHP Foundation. And before that, actually, happy birthday, PHP. I think, we didn't say that enough today. I started 15 years ago, so it's half of PHP's lifetime. I've been with PHP. And I wanted to, you already mentioned this blog post, but I wanted to show it again, that this brilliant blog post by Liam about how we need to celebrate PHP and not defend it, because PHP is awesome. It's alive as and beautiful. Through these 30 years, they were not all that smooth. And throughout this history, PHP went through different crises. If you think about it, every major PHP release was sort of a crisis. So every time PHP major release was actually about solving some kind of crisis. So PHP 3 was a absolutely new language rewritten from scratch by Andy and Z, who joined the project back then. Then in PHP 4, they tried to introduce object model, but it was not kind of full object model. So they tried to solve it in PHP 5 with introducing a new engine. And then there was PHP 6, which never happened, as you all know. And then there were some concerns about the PHP performance, and that's when HHVM or Hip Hop Virtual Machine appeared back then. And PHP responded with PHP 7. And then in 2021, PHP faced another crisis, which was not technical, but was more like a sustainability crisis, people crisis. So in PHP 2029, PHP was kind of in a sad situation. So the prompt for this image was PHP having a drinking problem over its ex. There was no money in the project. PHP had only one paid developer left after Nikita left the project. And the community was lost. There was no organization who could steer and drive the force behind PHP. So that's when JetBrains reached out to major industry players in PHP. And we all teamed up and chipped in with money to create the PHP Foundation, a non-profit organization that develops the PHP language. So the mission is to support, advance, and develop the language. And our goals back then were quite humble, actually, to solve those three major problems. Find money, basically to establish a sustainable funding model, transparent budget, then pay developers, find those developers, build the team, make sure that the knowledge is transferred from Nikita, so there is no bus factor. It's not one developer who knows everything, and there is a team. And keep the language running. So make sure that bugs are fixed, security issues are fixed, releases come out by schedule, and everything is fine. So all these were achieved within the next couple of years, by 2024, I would say. And that besides our beautiful and generous sponsors, there are people behind all of this, and that's our dev team. So we started with 6 engineers part-time, and we expanded the team in 2024 to 10 engineers. Some of them are full-time, like Gina, for example, some part-time, but it's 10 engineers. And we have the board, which consists of some of the major sponsors, representatives, and community representatives, including Niels, for example. And we also have a community and many people just helping out with different things. So in 2024, something incredible happened. We received investment from German government. And that's not grant, so they don't give money just for anything, so they give it for specific projects. So that's when we realized we can actually do more strategic planning and plan some bigger projects, solve some big issues in the ecosystem, and not just do maintenance. So we chose 4 projects. One of them was security audit, and I keep saying that it's the first audit in a decade, but I don't even know when there was external audit before that. So maybe it was the first one. I don't know. At least on my memory, it's the first external security audit. So there were a few issues, severe issues discovered. All of them are fixed, and you can check the public report on our website. And there is also a testing tool for FPM to test it under different configurations. Gina will tell more about this in a minute. We also updated documentation. It also went through a security review, not the whole documentation, some parts of it, because the full, it's 17,000 pages. So not all of them were reviewed, but some critical parts that are related to cryptography and working with file system, that parts were reviewed. And last but not least, Packle overhaul. So Packle was a system to install extensions. It was so old, no one wanted to touch it. So there is now a new tool. And again, Gina and James will share something about it in a minute. But besides that, there were many features, language features. And these are just the top features that team worked on. So lazy objects, property hooks, asymmetric visibility, and object API for big numbers with operator overloading support. And this, as I said, these are just the highlights. In total, there were like 36 RFCs accepted, maybe, but it's even more now. Because by the time I prepared these slides, there were a few new RFCs submitted. But the most important part is maintenance. So this is something that you cannot do as an enthusiast. You cannot do it coming after full-time work and doing it at home at night. So we need to have developers who are paid to do the maintenance. So it's issue, triaging, pull request reviews, infrastructure support, and extensions. Yeah, so extensions, one example is iMagic. So it's a very popular extension that one of the main maintainers of this extension, he couldn't continue maintaining it, and extension seemed abandoned. So PHP Foundation stepped up and is now maintaining this. And Jakub released update to support latest PHP versions. So I think the most important part is this graph. So you can see that not only contributions from the PHP Foundation developers grow, but actually the whole contributions from the whole community grow. That's the most important part. So that means that the work that PHP Foundation developers are doing with this maintenance, reviewing requests and answering questions, just enabling the community work. So we see it with every year it grows, and it's amazing. So what is actually the one thing I wanted to mention before I go to the impact is a thing that you might not know is that PHP Foundation actually collaborates with the European Commission on Cyber Resilience Act, and it's important for PHP Foundation to be recognized by this major political entity. That means that PHP is used in this critical digital infrastructure, at least in Europe. So all of this brings confidence to market, and we see that major PHP open source projects receive investments. And I want to emphasize it's not just commercial products built on top of PHP and receiving investment. It's open source projects receiving investments. That means that they rely on PHP, and PHP is stable and reliable language and ecosystem. So in 2025, we continue this strategic approach, and our main principles to follow are the partnerships and marketing. So we actually want to do something with the website, and we do small steps in this direction. Maybe we can, after this event, we can be more brave and push it forward. We want the community to continue growing, and we all, of course, continue the language evolution. And one of the projects that falls under all three of these principles is FrankenPHP. So it's now officially supported by the PHP Foundation. It's already by this time part of the PHP GitHub organization. So we'll try to do more things with this in regards of marketing and promotion and integration. And now I want to pass mic to Gina, who will tell you about some features that are under development.
Yep. Hello. So now it's my turn, and I will talk about what some of us, most of us actually, have been working on at the foundation in more or less different capabilities, and like what we're planning on releasing in the nearby future, hopefully. So Saki did the BC Mass object support for 8.4, but she's been continuing to work on optimizations, and she also wrote a new library, a C library, which is called XSSE, and this basically allows to use a common SSE API, which is low-level vectorization support for CPUs. So instead of just focusing on x86, which is Intel and AMD CPUs, it also focuses on ARM. And ARM is important because a lot of cloud providers are moving their infrastructure to run on ARM CPUs. I think the most famous one would be AWS with Graviton. So having the same performance and vectorization on ARM and Intel is kind of important. So Mate, that's probably the big new feature, which is landing in 8.5, which is the new UI API, which supports two specs, which is the WattW spec and the IFC 3986 spec, which is way older. But it basically gives an object interface and API, not interface, just API and classes, because it turns out interface, they don't really match properly. There's been long discussions about should there be an interface or not, and it's just been better decided to have final objects, concrete classes in their own namespace, where you can just instantiate and query, add stuff with wizard sort methods that you might be familiar if you use PSR style interfaces. So James, as mentioned previously, has been working on Pi. It uses the standard composer JSON to require your extensions, and you just run pi install, and you get your extensions installed in your project, which is a bit similar to Peckle, but instead of needing to name everything, you have all of the data in Composer, which you probably should be specifying anyway. And it works for dev extensions like Xdebug as well. So then Arnaud Leblanc has recently been working on a tail-core VM proof of concept. So currently when PHP is compiled with GCC, it is faster, for example, 5.5% on average on the Symfony framework demo. And it turns out that tail calling can generate efficient CPU code. So that's, again, like on your processor. And it was successfully applied to Python, and it was released in Python 3.14. And so the first part has already been merged, and it already improves like the performance of Symfony by 2.8% on like non-GCC compiled. PHP's compiled was not GCC. And the second part would make it basically equivalent and as fast as GCC. And what this would also enable us in the future scope is to unify different kinds of VMs so that we only have one VM kind, which reduces complexity and maintenance burden and makes it easier to review the code. Then Ilya has been working on pattern matching with Lamy, which is not at the foundation, but like works and is quite like well involved in the community and with PHP internals. So this is roughly an example of how it will probably look for like if you want to like access properties in a class. There are many other things currently being worked on about the implementation and how it should look like. I don't know exactly when it's going to come. I don't even know if it's going to be there for 8.5. I know there are like some teasing issues with like some gritty details, which sadly is always the hard part with adding new features to PHP. Then Jakub, as Roman mentioned earlier, has been working on a SAPI testing framework, which was mainly initially focused on FPM. So like allows us testing the integration and to prevent future regressions, because that's, you know, the main point of a test suite, really. But it also supports other web servers, so it's not just focused on FPM. So it's like Nginx or HTTPD, and you can also extend it to like run with Apache. And then the new-ish feature that he's been working on is like native JSON schema support to be added to the JSON extension. I'm not sure when Jakub is planning on announcing the IFC. I don't know if it's ready for 8.5 either, but looking at a quick glimpse, this is just roughly how the API would look like. So you create like your JSON schema object, and then you pass it to JSON decode or JSON encode. So Derek has been working on the infrastructure, modernizing the PHP.NET infrastructure, reducing the number of servers, trying to move stuff around, like making it more reliable, like less breakage. But also he's been thinking of creating a new datetime API which is less confusing, probably more robust, while keeping it backwards compatible with the existing API. Shivam, so Shivam, you might probably know because you probably use his Docker images, has been working on this tool which is called PHP Windows Builder, which allows to build PHP and any extension on Windows, which many people still do. I mean, I know I started writing PHP code on Windows with WAMP. I don't know if anybody remembers that or it still exists. But it also allows us to like have an automatic Windows build for PHP, which is done automatically when tagging and deployed onto the website. But he also created the GitHub action flow, which allows to like extensions when built with Pi, like to be supported to build a DDL for Windows, which I know it used to be the case that the Pecco machine was sponsored by Microsoft and had a machine that would build the DDLs, but that's been a bit of an ongoing issue for the last few years. So hopefully that should fix it. David has been working on a quite low-level feature, which is Linux packet filtering, which is able to capture and send raw packet data, which is like in the layer 2 format, which allows you to monitor, diagnose, and like possibly detect like network attacks within PHP, which would make PHP the first high-level language to support such a feature. And then myself, I've been roughly taking on some of the work that Arnold did last year and other people before that was Nikita to work on something which I'm naming limited abstract generic types. So these currently would only work on interfaces, so no class support. And you could basically have a generic built into the language where you could specify a template type in your interface, and you could then use it for different, like within the interface, and then any concrete implementation would need to support it when they implement it and they decide which types they add. Currently, it's very much proof of concept, like it's kind of running, but there's no type declaration support, there's no abstract classes as it's only on interfaces. You cannot extend, and this is the key point, is this approach doesn't extend to concrete classes due to technical reasons, which I can go on to if people really care. But it kind of solves the need that some people have been pushing, like in this release cycle, of allowing never as parameter types, without the weird questions about like, what does a never parameter type mean, because it means you can't call it. And then there's one final thing. Now, due to logistical reasons, James will not come here. So I will announce it. So James, earlier this morning, tagged Pi 1.0. So it's finally stable. So you can install it and install all of your PHP extensions that way rather than Pecco. So yeah.
So we're wrapping up, and I want to say that, yeah, we need you folks. We need your support. If you can donate yourself to the foundation, or you can ask your employer, your company, just share the word, tell about the foundation to other developers, to your bosses, everyone you know, and contribute. There's a lot of ways you can contribute, and the PHP community has never been as open as it's now and as welcoming. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you, folks. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for walking us through all of that. Like, fascinating, kind of see all the details of what's being worked on and like how much there is to come. And it's funny because I think I sometimes have the feeling that was brought up in the earlier talk of like, oh, PHP seems kind of feature complete because you know all the basics are covered. But then you start thinking about stuff and you're like, oh wow, there's like so many things we could still do. And I think that's fascinating though, that you have kind of this, I guess, like a pretty stable core to build on, right? And but then there's still so much space to explore around that.
I'm happy to hear that generics are coming, and I kind of ignored all the detail, like the side notes. So no, I know there are a lot of side notes to make, and that's fine. But I'm happy to learn that, you know, it's still we're still like investigating, and who knows, one day I know the solution, but yeah, the community has to be ready for that. Like runtime ignored. Anyway, I do have a couple of questions that that we can discuss here. Let me check the time. Actually, yeah, we still have
a few minutes.
We have a few minutes. This is interesting for folks who use PHP every day, but don't like contribute, don't have any like internal knowledge. Are there ways, besides, of course, like financially, are there ways to get more involved with the foundation? Are like I immediately thought about like small documentation stuff, but I don't know. That's maybe you. Yeah.
You want to take this? Should I take this?
You can.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of obvious to say, but like, yeah, obviously documentation is a way to contribute back to the project. I mean, I started with documentation. Like I started with translation. Like if you. Oh, sorry. If you speak, I guess there are many people from across the world, hopefully watching us. Like, if you speak a language that is not well maintained on the on PHP.net, you can join the translation effort. If you need questions, just ask me. I will happily like guide you and like get you into like the project and help people. I know like I was like in Verona like last month, and like somebody like who worked on the Italian translation for like a bunch of symphony stuff was like, hey, how can I join? How can I help? I know the Italian translation is not up to scratch. And they was like, yeah, sure, send me an email and I'll get you in. And like, I think now they trying to do, and like they pushing some stuff to the repo, to the Italian translation. So that's one thing. The other thing is just testing. You can look at our code coverage. There are many extensions which have like not ideal code coverage. Like if you know like a specific database, you can improve code coverage, or like features that you think are not well tested, or like, is this a bug? Is this the proper behavior? That is also very helpful to do. And I mean, yeah, issue triage is not easy, but I mean, sometimes just being able to confirm that you can reproduce the issue, if we can't or if it's difficult, that can also be helpful.
There's another question that I think maybe was sort of treated as a joke, but I actually find it somewhat interesting, which was the why don't we rewrite PHP core in PHP? And I'll try and turn this into a more realistic question of like, does it make sense to like kind of try to ease participation contributions to PHP core? And that's kind of what we were just talking about. If considering current performance levels, we try and kind of take things out of, like, not implement everything in C. Because I mean, I realize there's been sort of attempts, looks at this direction, and is that something we should explore further?
It's funny you say this, because it turns out there are like certain functions which actually perform better written in native PHP than in C, because there's not like a bunch of overhead of changing from the PHP VM to C. I know Arnaud was toying with something like a bit of a proof of concept. I'm not exactly sure where that went. There were a few issues of like, oh, how do you match the semantics that the engine always has to what userland does? But I mean, I think that's something that we should be exploring. Definitely, like, there are certain things which it would make easier to like add support for, especially small functions or utility functions, rather than, oh, you need to like write it in C and deal with like reference counting and possibly memory allocation bugs and stuff like that. So I think that's definitely something we should be looking into more.
It would be nice to maybe ship some like Composer with PHP and maybe some packages with PHP, like we discussed yesterday. If, for example, there's a Symfony component that is used by Symfony and by Laravel, that's already like, what, 70% of all the applications, modern applications. So if, maybe it should be part of the core at some, but it's an open discussion. I don't think it has ever been discussed seriously, and there are no like specific plans, but the way anyone could participate or contribute is open this discussion and just bring this problem up and suggest some solution.
Yeah, I think this is another question actually very similar to what you brought up, which is like other languages seem to have a lot of tooling built in or closer to the core language somehow, while in PHP it's very spread out across a lot of community projects, and other intentions to bring these tools closer to the core. But I think you kind of answered that question, exactly, like, yes, it's a great idea. Concrete plans, not as far as I understand.
We did some steps in this direction. So, for example, PHP.NET website never mentioned anything besides PHP itself, and completely ignoring Composer seems just yeah. So and last year, Larry,
I think it was Jim and Larry, and there's a few people like pushed in like a policy RFC which allows the website to start potentially mentioning stuff, because that used to be like this red line. I mean, we now also advertise the PHP Foundation on the website that required its own policy RFC. I think it's just that the project can be sometimes very conservative, and I think at one point it felt that like, oh, the PHP was too big of a kitchen sink, and it was like, we should, like, when we commit and we decide something, we commit, and it's like there for like a while. Like it's not like you can just experiment for something and then remove it the next version. We don't have this mechanism. So if you add something to the language, then it's there for like probably minimum 7 years.
I would like besides generics, but Nikita was, before he left, he was talking about additions or something, like to have a way to have opt-in features where you can introduce more experimental features and have it out there in the wild, get a much better feedback from the community for a couple of years, and even then still decide like, okay, this is not the way we're going, because now it really feels like it needs to be like right from the first time, and like we're all in software development. That never happens.
You never get it right the
happens.
first time.
But
may I just jump in? So there is an RFC and initiative called True Async, which is developed mostly by a guy who is not part of the PHP Foundation, nor actually never was part of internal discussions. He just came out of nowhere, being like super skilled apparently. But the PHP Foundation developers help him a lot with consulting and just reviewing and providing feedback. And one of the things folks discussed there is actually maybe providing this under some experimental flag, because it's really hard to come up with API right away.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. Hey, you were talking about the website as well, and I quickly wanted to circle back to that also, because it was mentioned in the previous panel there. The websites. So what's going on with the websites? Any plans there? Like just.
I mean, I think with the website is like technically anybody can chime in. Like it's open source. It's like PHP Web. You can, or Web PHP. Sometimes it's PHP in front and sometimes at the back. But you can just go and contribute. But I think it's like a lot of it is what is the redesign? What do we want? And like people will have many different opinions about how it should look, what it should be, and I don't think we have found a good way of like aggregating the data and opinions. Like technically the official channel is the mailing list, but that can get quite hectic. And it feels you can get into bike shed. But there were a few people who like trying to work on it, and I mean, ever so often I see people like making a mock-up demo.
True.
Which is cool. Like, definitely it's cool. And I mean, a lot of the like all of the documentation content is under like Creative Commons ownership, so you can technically write like, you know, make a whole demo website and like you're allowed to like publish it under a different thing, which might be a way for people to experiment and being like, hey, I want to have the docs look differently, and maybe if this works, we can be like, oh cool, this feels nice, this works well. Like, that might also be an avenue rather than just making mock-up demos and necessarily trying to interface with like the repo and stuff. But it needs to be aware that at one point it needs to get integrated back into the project. So you need to be aware of that.
One thing we already are doing, so we actually introduced analytics. And that's how we came up with this ruffle question. So we know which pages are more visited. So one of the most visited, actually the second most visited page on the website is downloads page. And now we know that. And it's actually being worked on right now. So we want, we got some inspiration from other languages, and we'll make sure it's welcoming for everyone.
Okay, well, that's good. I'll remember that for next year, PHPverse, when you're back, and we can like discuss the progress on that.
1 year retrospective. Has the PHP website been updated?
I think it's a good one. Niels, did you have any other questions? I mean, there are like a lot more questions.
I think there's one thing I just want to kind of clarify that I think I can also answer somebody on the PHP Foundation that I noticed scrolling through the chat. That because I think somebody asked after how can we help the PHP Foundation? I think you explained very well. How can you help contribute to PHP? Help the PHP Foundation really primarily by getting your employers to participate in sponsoring this, because the point of the PHP Foundation is to fund developers who get to spend significant amount of their time, as Gino's been showing us, on PHP core functionality, on surrounding necessities. And we don't need a lot of like hands-on help on the PHP Foundation right now. There's a few things here and there sometimes too, but if you have contribution ability, contribute to PHP. Like do exactly what Gino said. That's where we need help. And then the foundation is really a vehicle to turn the money that we get from companies into effective change.
If you have questions, please send me an email. I will happily answer questions. Or I guess tag me on Discord. I am there, like at Georgios somewhere. Please don't spam me. That might take a while to get through. But I'm happy to answer questions if needed.
We actually read all the emails on the foundation. We have open discussions on GitHub. I read all the tweets, Mastodon. So feel free to reach out to us.
Cool. Folks, I think with all of that being said, I'm going to send you back to your place.
Thanks very much.
A Discord thread like with lots of messages and questions. So feel free to scroll through those.
Start there.
If you still have the energy.
I will start doing that.
Thanks a lot, Roman and Gina. It was really insightful, and the foundation. You're doing
Brent,
it.
Niels, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.